Welcome, everybody. Angel, are you going to open us up here?
Yeah, I can, and you can. It's up to you. All right, I'm sorry. Yeah, can we just go? There we go.
Oh,
Um,
my goodness.
yeah, I'm trying to share it on my stuff too, so that we have it everywhere. And it's a learning experience every time we do this.
Yep. It's very exciting. This is what the third, or is it the fourth REI Rocks review? It doesn't matter. There's going to be a gazillion of them by design. That's why if you actually spend this time with us, you can actually rely on us coming back every week. And I am so excited to have my friend, fellow Canadian Edmund Chen here today. How you doing today, Edmund?
Good. How are things?
Pretty good.
Fantastic. So, Angel, we're going to be going through the spring or the fall summit of 2021, where you interviewed Edmund. Do you want to explain what the review's all about, or?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we want to share with people is we've got over 250 hours of this kind of content from the past 6 summits that we've done. And we have a very low cost subscription level where you gain access to all of it. And what we're doing is we're showing you basically when you're watching this stuff, how do you break it down? I think a lot of us feel like we're drinking water through a fire hydrant when we're going to these events and just being inundated with all this information. And so one of the things that we're doing on these Fridays is we're showing you, hey, you can consume it this way. You can go back, you can stop it, you can think about it, you can take notes, and we're going to give you a doggy bag or our takeaways so that you leave with the things that we found that should be highlighted.
How awesome is this? And the nice thing is that even if not all our dogs are barking, because maybe we haven't had enough coffee yet, we're still going to be okay, because we're just going to be watching the video, and it's we always watch it at 1.5 times speed. It's a great habit to earn back some extra time in your day. I personally always watch at 2 times, which it definitely takes some getting used to. I don't care how much of an A-type personality you are. But one thing that I like about this format as well, I should add, is that the concern is if you're watching older content, is it might be like, well, does that really apply to right now? And I guess to start off, before we start watching the interview, Edmund, what's your guess before we even start watching? How many things have changed in the last year and a half, in your opinion, as far as how you relate to high net worth individuals?
I think the fundamentals are still there of interacting with people. I think what you will notice is that there's probably a little bit of a change of investor sentiment. People are a little bit more nervous. There's a lot more in the news. People are taking a look at their portfolios and seeing that things are down. And inflation is up, so pricing is up, and that's really relevant because people go to the grocery store, people fill up. Those are the two major things, and then they take a look at their stock portfolio and it's down significantly. That'll certainly have an impact. So what you talk about might be different, and what you need to address to begin with. But otherwise, in that, getting to know people and really caring about their needs and being empathetic, I think all those fundamentals are still relevant.
Beautiful. I love it. So let's try sharing the screen and let's make this happen. And I need to rewind back to here.
Did you know that 90% of the world's millionaires invest in real estate? Well, I'm Angel with the Academy Presents Real Estate Investing Rocks, and I'm here to help you if you want to go for your piece of that pie. Hey guys, thank you so much for being here and being a part of everything that is the amazingness of the summit, the speakers, the information, the panels, the Q&A, the networking. There's just a lot of stuff, right? And I'm just so glad that you're here and I get to be a part of your journey. So now we're going to talk a little bit about maybe some ideas and methods behind how to really build a good base in your capital raising and in your relationship building. Because honestly, at the end of the day, that relationship is what's going to get you where you need to go over the long haul. So kind of keep that in mind. And so who I had to help us learn about this is Ed. Well, I want to make sure I say right. Do I call you Edmund or just Ed?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And so he's going to tell us a little bit about himself. And just so you know, I did do some recon and he is legit. So he kind of hit our scene quick and out of nowhere. And it was really awesome. The universe works for us in mysterious ways. And this was one of those ways. And I'm really glad the universe made this happen, helped you cross my path, and that you're here speaking with us today. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, it's a pleasure being here, Angel. Thank you for inviting me on. For those of you that don't know me, I spent about 2 decades, about 20 years in financial services, most of that as a licensed professional in many different arenas. So I started out in private equity real estate syndications from day one. So dealing with accredited investors. And I started out as a cold caller. After about a decade, I went from a cold caller all the way up to a senior partner at a firm that was managing about $500 million in assets under admin. And directly, I was managing for my clients about 70 million. Had a direct reports of about 5 other advisors, and indirectly another 25 of our staff. So that was kind of my private equity experience. But at the same time, I was also licensed as a stockbroker. And I'm from Toronto. I'm born and raised in Toronto. So here it's the equivalent of Series 7. So I was also a Series 7 licensed advisor and servicing high net worth clients all the way up to and building up to family office. So multifamily family office. And then from there, I went to a large brokerage firm, a large Canadian brokerage firm, second largest in Canada. And my wife is also in the industry. So my wife is a licensed advisor as well. She's still in the industry. I spent some time in life insurance as well. So as a license, the reason why I had a life insurance license is because I was doing a lot of succession planning for high net worth clients and estate planning. All that said and told, after about 20 years, I kind of had enough, and I decided to leave the industry. So I hold no more licenses. And what I do is my real passion, which is training advisors and mentoring advisors and training so many advisors throughout my career. That's when I realized, that's the next thing I wanted to do. And so I left the industry so that I could train more people, and I'm not restricted by licensing. Because if I was, I'd only be able to train Canadians and only be able to train people in my province and for the firm I was working for.
If I unmute myself, my questions are much better. And my question for you, Edmund, is how much of what you had to do, because I'm just trying to put it together in my head, the insurance piece with the investment piece in the other ones. And I know how you frame, a lot of this, this insurance structure for these high net worth individuals. But how much of what you would do that for would be to basically open up more room in somebody's portfolio to, make new acquisitions or something like that. And I don't mean that in a sense of like, oh, goody, this is like one of my ulterior motives. I mean, like, I think that the people you worked with would be motivated to make sure that their legacy is all buttoned up, and then they have everything else freed up to, deploy in great opportunities. Do you have any comment on that, or what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that people don't realize is that when we take a look at the life insurance side of the house, so in financial services, you have the investments like mainstream, like Dow Jones is mainstream. Then you're going to have alternative asset classes, which is real estate and real estate equivalents, or things that are private. But then there's a whole other arena. We're talking about insurance, and that you can take a very deep dive in. And we just stuck with very high level. But the major split that you're going to find with life insurance is using life insurance as a risk mitigation tool, and then using life insurance as an asset class. So using life insurance as an investment. It is best used for somebody who is ultra high net worth, that has more money than they need in their retirement or need in their life. And if you can do that, you can take those funds and you can use them and put it towards a life insurance policy, which it will turn it into a multiple. So when the person's gone, the estate or the family will be a multiple of whatever you put in. And that's using insurance as an asset class. That's a very high level.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I imagine that's a pretty personal choice for these family offices or whatnot of what constitutes more money than you'll ever need in your lifetime. But is that assuming like do they price in like a 20% like complete portfolio value dip, or like what's the magic number or like a typical number as far as like, and also like longevity? Like, are people planning, like off of 120 years before their death, and like also accounting for like a 20% dip like the stock market this year? I don't know the exact numbers because I don't watch equities quite that hard. But
yeah, I think in financial planning, they use models, and there's some arguments are made somewhere between 90 to 100. And it also depends on family, like your parents and your grandparents, how long did they live? And you take those into account. So then that gives you an idea of how long somebody might live. Then you work into like how much money do you have right now? And then what's your current burn rate? So if somebody's got like $10 million, for an example, and they're 80 years old, they say, well, how much longer do you expect to live? And how much money do you spend? Are you spending $1 million a year? And then we factor in an average return on your investments. Let's just say, like, pick a number like 6% on average that you'd be growing. It's like, do you think you'll ever outlive your money? And if the answer is no, then you say that, well, how much of this do you think that you could dedicate? And one of the things I like about alternative asset classes, like real estate, is the more you let go of liquidity, the better investment returns you're going to get. So when you go to the ultimate on the other side, on the insurance side, if we're willing to completely let go of liquidity, if you gave somebody $1 million and you put that $1 million towards premiums, you will get a multiple. So it'll probably end up being, depending on your age, it could be anywhere from 2 to 5 million, but that's also tax-free money, right? Mm-hmm. So if you put that premium towards that, it's like buying an investment portfolio on layaway, right? So you just buy it in installments, and you buy it at like $100,000 a year or whatever. And if you end up max, you'll end up paying, would be say $1 million. But if you do, the death benefit on that would end up being a multiple of what you put in.
Wow, that's awesome. Thanks for that.
But if I take my license down, which I did a number of years ago, I can pretty much train anybody I like. So take a whole bunch of knowledge from 20 years and then open up and be able to give it to anybody that's interested, wants to learn more about how to raise capital.
Wow. That's amazing. And so special thank you to Aaron Goins, because without him, we would have never gotten to actually meet you. So awesome to Aaron.
Aaron's a great guy. I have a lot to thank for him too. I really appreciate meeting him. It was just absolutely fabulous.
Yeah. Because but he met you on, was it Clubhouse?
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy stuff. So
so we met in a veterans Clubhouse group that was talking about real estate, and Aaron's a big passionate about that as well. And I'm also ex-military, so I spent 10 years in airborne infantry with the Canadian Army.
Crazy. Hearing airborne freaks me out. I hate flying, and like infantry is like on the ground, but if you're airborne, then you have to jump to the ground somehow, and that's no. No. Yeah. That's gonna be in my thoughts now. I'm not gonna be able to focus on anything else because all I can see is yes, no. Anyway, I'll try and move past that. But one of the cool things that I really like every time I hear you talk is the idea of really forging relationships and being more on that side of things as opposed to just numbers based or transactional. I mean, there's a place for both, I guess, but I know I lean more to the relationship building because that's what I like. And I think that it serves me as a person better because it fits my personality. What would you say about that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So for those of you that have just started capital raising or on the earlier part of your capital raising journey, it's great to learn this technique. And this is something some advice I'd really like to give you. So for me, it's going back to that cliche or that story about the tortoise and the hare. And I can show you how the tortoise can actually go faster than the hare. And it really starts with this concept of exponential growth versus linear growth. And there's a great statement out there that goes that you can make a sale and make a commission, or you can make a friend and make a fortune. And here's where they start to separate when you have your attitude to your capital raising. One of them is that you see a lot of folks out there, they're more interested in the numbers, they're more interested in getting a huge amount of numbers immediately. A lot of it tends to be marketing, social media marketing, all this type of stuff. For me, that's not how I built my book of business. My book of business was 100% deeply ingrained in a relational model. And the relational model basically is starting to get into incredibly white glove service. And it's about looking after your clients deeply. At the beginning, you're going to have less effectiveness. But as you start to grow and develop in your career, it's going to grow so much larger. And it's basically recognizing that there's a lot of diamonds in your backyard. And it's using a relational model versus a transactional model.
Can you pause it?
I'm like scribbling.
Sure.
All right. So this was from fall of 21, right? Right. I had not really done much capital raising at this point. But this was, I'd been compiling a lot of what I'd been hearing Edmund talk about. I'd been calling friends, getting tips, crying to people. But when it came time for me and Jason to really raise capital, we fell back on the relationships. And we were able to raise $1 million on our first raise. And that is not the norm. But I really attribute it to the methods and the strategies that I heard from Ed and that I heard from other friends, and just compiling all of those and then kind of finding my way on my own for a few things. But I will 100% every day say that you really need to be establishing relationships with people and don't just make it about the numbers, because I think that actually makes it harder.
I think a lot of it is that the only thing it can't be is fake. You can be however you are. You don't have to be so self-conscious as most people are. I think that's what a lot of people bring into, going into a new industry, a new business, anything like that. But you really have to know that just let yourself go. And the one that gave me a lot of inspiration was checking out different YouTubers and these different streamers. And a lot of it was just, it didn't have much content to it. And like their caricature that they made for who they were, you know, it was kind of annoying. But I noticed that like with time, you're just like, it's just a person trying to make a buck. And so like, as long as it's not fake, I think that people will resonate and choose you regardless of how, you know, weird you are or whatever else. And I think that's part of the relationship thing, and it's just avoid that fakeness.
That is so much.
So just pausing if you have any other questions that you'd like to ask along those lines, what direction you'd like me to go.
So I guess the thing that's pushed me towards relational has just been, again, it's my personality, but I don't like to reinvent the wheel. And I feel like people that are really transaction based, they're more concerned about like, how many people can I talk to? How many people can I get my network? It's almost like every single time they go out to raise funds, it's like reinventing the wheel. And I mean, I guess it's kind of like a scatter shot even, because even if you're transaction based, you're going to have good deals. So you'll have repeat investors. But I mean, how does that compare to the repeat that you're going to get over on that relational side?
Absolutely. So the higher the net worth the individual, the more that relational is going to beat the transactional model. And for me, I wanted to develop a career based on ultra high net worth, and that's how you eventually move into family office. I find it very challenging. I would think it's almost impossible or close to impossible to really get some solid family office clients in a transactional model. Throughout my 10 years or 20 years, I got up to the point where I ended up at third generation wealth. So I managed the grandfather, father, and then their son's money. And it's incredible. You can only do that when you have a really deeply ingrained and you really live by it. And you're not there to make a sale. You're there because you genuinely care for the family. And they sense that. And that's how you keep that client for 3 generations. And it's amazing. There's something special about that. Talking to someone like, here, let me tell you what your grandfather taught me when I was a junior advisor, a young advisor. And I've been with that family for over a decade. That was 15 years, right? And that's something that that really only transact or really only relational can get to. So you're talking about if you do transactional, you're just going to be grinding all the time, right? Not to say that you can't be profitable doing it. It's just a different model. And it's more, for me, it's more likely that you'll end up in the lower accredited realm in the mass affluent. It's unlikely that you'll start to move up into higher accredited and family office. You might be able to get them one or twice, but if you're more interested, they get the sense that you're more interested in selling them 100,000 or 50,000, and then you move on, and you're more interested, like this hair, trying to collect more checks. And then if they have a follow-up question, you don't answer for a week. Yeah, it's unlikely. Somebody like me will come along and steal that client from you.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you're saying there. And I think it really comes in contrast to what you learn in most coaching programs, because I do think that they do focus on transactional. And Angel, I know that you already plugged it once, but I just want to remind everybody in the audience that what we're doing here is we're watching content from the library of summits, the REI Rock summits that have happened in the past, and you can get access to all of them. Angel, do you want to say a few things about that subscription that's covering my face?
Absolutely. So with this subscription, it's a monthly subscription, but you get access to everything. And the real kind of, I guess, piece de resistance, you actually get access to all of the live stuff as long as you are a subscription level like member. So if you're a subscription based member and a summit's coming up, you get the upgrade to the VIP access simply because you have a subscription. And then you get to be a part of the live stuff. So like Ed ran a masterclass this past summit, you would have been able to be there. And it's not an insane amount of money. I mean, it's less than what you spend in groceries for sure. It's way less than a tank of gas, but you get access to a lot of really stellar information. So.
Yep, I really love that. And we're watching all of these videos at 1.5 times speed. And that's I'm going to get used to these layouts one of these days, so people aren't just like over all the changes and transitions and all that kind of stuff.
Well, we don't have the big screen you do, so it's not quite as immersive.
Right, exactly. So, but we're watching at 1.5 times speed, and I think that's something that, because I've got so used to consuming my videos faster, it actually is more appealing for me now to have recorded material. And the other thing that's really great is if you look at the different summits that we've had, we have a lot of repeat speakers. And so that means when our next one comes up in the spring, you could be fully prepared with fantastic questions prepared specifically for that expert. And because it's experts discussing these subjects, and it's not just part of a, hey, but we're actually trying to sell you an introduction to real estate investing course, because that's not what's going on. You get a different level of conversation, and I think it makes it really something special.
So
But
before you hit play, I had a question for Ed. When you're really differentiating yourself and you're building relationships with ultra high net worth and family office, like those families, what do you think really sets you apart? I mean, I realize it's like the white glove service, but what is it that really sets you apart?
I think a big part of it is are you able to convince them that your main objective is about them and not just about yourself? And that's a big differential between the transactional. It's difficult to say, or it's easy to go up against somebody that's transactional based, because I just go out and say, hey, there's things that I can do that is above and beyond, that is really paying attention and listening to the small things that they're talking about, things that are uncovering what are their deep values, what are their pain points, what are issues that they're struggling with in their whole family, not necessarily on just what you have to offer. And can you pick up those tiny little details? It's all in those little details.
Wow.
Awesome. Rock and roll.
Yeah, no, it's I think it's almost like you said, if you focus on the transaction, you're always going to be in that grind. And I wonder if, as a society, sometimes I feel like we worship the grind, but I don't want to work harder. I want to work smarter. And I would much rather only have to make 5 phone calls as opposed to 50.
Absolutely.
So it's
right. So that's a very valid point, Angel. So you take a look at it. It's like at this earlier stage, ask yourself, what kind of business, what kind of syndication do we want to run? So let's just take a look at the food industry for a second. If you take a look at McDonald's, McDonald's is an incredibly profitable business. Don't get me wrong, right? They sell tons of food, right? But that's one model of running a business. And that entire culture and model is completely different to a 5-star Michelin star restaurant. Right. So if you take a look at that, it's a completely different strategy. Now, if you have an ultra high net worth family, where do you think they're going to go? Well, sure, maybe they go to McDonald's every once in a while, but they really appreciate the 5-star service. And that's the type of financial services firm that, and keep in mind, when you get to the high level family office and institutional money on Wall Street, it's all 5-star Michelin type service.
Wow. So I usually say I don't get intimidated by much. That's a little intimidating. Because you aren't the only person out there providing the level of service you were providing. There probably weren't that many. But there was some of that, what was it Nicole called it? Nicole Pendergrass called it worthy rivals. Not competition, but worthy rivals. So you were amongst probably 5, 10, maybe 20 worthy rivals. And so to think that if you want to get to that level, you have to be willing to commit to that level of service 24/7 from here on out, because you're hoping for it to pass from generation to generation.
Right.
That's a high order or a tall order.
Well, here's how I can make it seem less intimidating. Okay, and explain to you why that is actually very rare, because you touched on it. You said that, most people celebrate the grind. Yeah. So first off, there's a whole whack of people, the majority of people out there that are syndicating, that start off doing that, thinking that they got to grind, right? So you're gonna supersede them eventually, right? Because they don't even get it yet. Then you get into the other category where there's most of society in North America today. We tend to be self-centered, and to find somebody who is empathetic is a rarity in today's society. If you want to be the epitome of white glove service, it starts with having a center that is outside of yourself and caring about somebody else to the point where you can anticipate their needs, because you're so solely focused on them and not what I want. So my want would be, I need to close a commission. But if you have an empathetic attitude and heart, then you will look out at everybody else and say, what does this person need? What's the next 3 things they're going to need after this? And anticipate that. That is the epitome of white glove service. That is a rare characteristic. Most people don't want to do that. When you tell people, it's like, if you went to college or high school, it's like, train yourself to be a servant to people. It's like, screw you. It's like, I'm here to learn. I'm here to get better so I can have servants. It's like, no, there's something honorable about, I truly believe there's something honorable about serving other people. I learned that as a philosophy in the military. The whole core concept of the military is sacrifice.
So Ed, is that a rebelliousness thing? Because I think that that's something that Angel and I definitely share. Me, I was guitar teacher as a teenager, right? The local music store, so that was totally the fashion. So is it a rebelliousness thing? And because I definitely see how everybody has to come around and realize hey, no, the only way that we're going to have any modicum of success is by cooperating with people. What do you think?
Yeah, that's an important part, right? It's like I tell people, if you really want to get great at high level sales, high level capital raising, the people that are going to do it the best is the people that actually like people. If you don't like people, it's going to be very challenging for you.
So I guess another thing that's turned around, because, like I've had a little bit of a roller coaster last 14, 15 years. And so I think one of the things that people think is if they've had any, customer service experience, any customer facing in general, when it's just like the common public, you get one impression of, people are like this, but in a lot of ways, they're kind of at their worst in those sorts of situations. Whereas, as new syndicators and whatnot, people are super welcoming in this community. And I do find that, they are a next level of, patient, a next level of even intelligent, I end up finding, because we end up getting the best people from all sorts of different fields. Is that something that you think is worth remarking on there, Ed?
Well, yeah, I think that a big part of that is that the higher net worth that you go, and we sort of touched on this, is that I tell people it's a contact sport because you're not playing by yourself. And what's going to happen is that you're up against other advisors. So the higher the net worth, the more pro people start getting, and they kind of don't like giving up their seat very easily. So what they'll do is there'll be some other professionals, sometimes even another private equity or another alternative asset class, but certainly there's going to be like a licensed stockbroker there. And they can come in and and they don't play fair. They'll come in and try to discredit you as much as they can. And you have to have thick skin or be able to defend yourself. And they will come up against some clients. They may even start to criticize you as well. It can get really tough. You have to be able to stand your ground and do so in a very diplomatic and very considerate way.
So I had
That's
something
awesome.
I wanted to kind of add to. The people that we're reaching out to are not, and I don't want this to sound bad, but they're not like just regular society. You're talking to the top 15%, maybe even the top 10% of people out there. And I would venture to say that that group of people are not used to having people try to understand where they're coming from. Because when you're out in the general public, people don't get you. I had on my successfully unemployed shirt yesterday, and I got some really disgusting looks from people. And I was like, oh my gosh, you don't get it. And it really hit home with me that people aren't going to get it. And if we can provide that level of empathy to a group of people that aren't used to that, that's going to set us apart too.
I love that. I love that. Absolutely bang on.
Pricing yourself, your discipline for the benefit of somebody else. Foreign policy, domestic policy, that's the core attitude. I spent 10 years when I was young, and I took that attitude when I became a financial manager to recognize that, there's a lot, it's a battlefield when it comes to financial services. There's all this stuff and there's so much chaos and confusion that if I can make clarity out of that, that's partly for me and my benefit of my family, but it's mostly for the benefit of my clients to give them that clarity. That's very high empathetic thinking, and that puts you into like the 10%, if not the 1% of wealth managers out there, because most of them are interested in trying to, how much commission can I make off this person so I can buy a bigger house?
Wow. So that's why when we were talking to our broker and I asked him if he had gotten enough, he stopped and then kept talking. And I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. Are you getting enough money out of this deal? And it caught him for a second. He's like, wow, that's sweet. And then kept going. But I understand that people should get paid their value. And even if that means I have to pay more, I want to make sure that at the end of the day, we all feel that everything was fair. Whether it was the purchase price or your commission or how much you're paying me for something that I'm doing for you. And I think part of that came from my husband has his doctorate, and in his, there've been times when he really hasn't been paid for his knowledge. And that was really hard for me, because if he was coding something or if he was running some program that he knows how to run because he spent all this time in school, if it only took an hour, people only wanted to pay for an hour, and they didn't think it was worth more than what they believed it was worth. When in fact, he spent 10 years of his life learning all that, and then another 15 to 20 of experience learning how to do those things, and you're wanting to pay him for an hour at whatever you think it's worth. And it's been watching that happen over time that made me realize that I have to make sure that everybody's getting what they think is fair. And even though the broker's trying to make money on the deal and he needs his commission, and and he's representing the seller and not me, I still want to make sure that he's getting what he needs. And I think it caught him off guard, because I was concerned about that.
I think that really is a very different way of thinking about things. It goes right into what you were saying a minute ago. And I know that it doesn't matter if you are on the side where you're looking for a broker, or if you're on the other side where you're looking for people to get involved with. I know that I'd be sitting there thinking, where on earth could I ever find people like that to hang out with? And I think Marvelous Mondays, which is at noon Eastern, every Monday, is totally the place. I didn't mention it a second ago. It looks like I need to expand the screen out a little bit there. Yeah, there's the meetup link right there. The Academy, all you see is this beard and mouth hanging through behind this. This is wonderful. But yeah, so theacademypresents.com/meetup link, that's where you register for that. Angel, do you want to say a few things about the Marvelous Mondays?
I can, but really the only one that matters right now is that Ed comes to Marvelous Mondays too.
Exactly. Exactly.
And do you ever share tips at Marvelous Mondays, Ed?
Yeah, I might share a couple of tips or two. I kind of like to bring some value.
That's awesome.
So that's kind of the beauty of the Marvelous Mondays meetup, is we're pretty chill and we're just having fun and talking. And it isn't always real estate, because you don't always have to talk real estate. You can just actually have friendships in this group, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And diversification is a real thing. It's we're not dogmatists here when it comes to all this stuff. We're not sitting here saying commercial real estate just for the sake of commercial real estate. We're saying commercial real estate because it's a good idea. It actually has some features that other investment classes don't have, like how the apartment complexes don't have an entire PR department sitting there saying, how do we tell our shareholders that they have all these problems, and they spin it on you like they do on Wall Street. But if you were sitting there looking at my screen saying, what on earth do I do with this noise looking thing on the screen? That's for if you pull out your phone and you scan that. That's the same as going to the link, but that's how you can register and see us on Mondays. So that is totally awesome stuff. And now let's continue.
And that's very noble of you. So on the syndicator side of it, the way that I ask my value. So back when putting back my syndicator or my private equity hat back on, when I was in the private equity world, what I explained to my clients is that I asked for my value, but I did it in a way that I wasn't embarrassed by doing that. And there's a value quadrant that I teach. So imagine 4 squares, and you take a look at the bottom left, and the bottom left is low value, low cost items. So you get a low value, low cost business model. That's like the dollar store, right? It's very cheap things, but it's throwaway, and I don't expect white glove service when I go to the dollar store, right? And that works. But on the opposite side, then you can have like low cost, high value, high cost, high value. But for me, the quadrant I stayed in private equity is high cost, high value. So I'm not the cheapest you're going to find out there when it comes to my annual fees, but I will give you my value still far exceeds that. And the reason why that model works in ultra high net worth is because the more net worth you have, the more time is important to you than money. Because you start to, the higher net worth you get, the more you start to understand the value of your time. So if you talk to any Wall Street lawyer, they know exactly how much their hour is worth, because that's how they're billed. Some of you $1,200 an hour. So if you try to ask them for an hour's worth of their time, they immediately think, I got to write you a $1,200 check. So if I understand that, what I'm trying to do is show you that if you spend an hour with me.
I should just add, and I think Angel will enjoy this too, that we're not just saying hypothetically some attorneys make $1,200 an hour as far as their billing rate. We know one anyway. So
that value to you will be worth $2,500. That's what you gotta. That's the hurdle you gotta get over, right? Which means that I gotta shortcut things for you. So, say for an example, you want to get into a deal and you don't have the time to do the diligence. And I can say, listen, I went through cover to cover on that PPM, and I know every single word on that PPM, and it took me 10 hours to read through it. And I'll give you the high level, and I summarized it here for you. And here's all the key points. And you save that person 9 hours. That's high cost, high value. So I'll charge you a huge amount. Like maybe I'll charge you $800 to give you that executive summary. But at the same time, to you, it saved you 10, and you're a $1,200 an hour person. So I still charge you high amount, but it's still high value, higher value for you. And that's the realm of the ultra high net space. So if you don't see that now, then you're not going to be able to get there, because if you're going to be if you decide to move and grow in a transactional model, you're going to be stuck in linear, and it's not impossible, but it's going to be very difficult to move into the high net worth space.
Can you pause it for a second?
Wow.
Sure.
Oh, you've really got me thinking, because
I know I'm pausing it a ton, but something just kind of hit me. So I'm a talker. I like to talk. How would I be able to move into those more expensive time slots where I'm not wasting someone's time because I talk a lot.
I think a great way to do that is the sales process is not just one introduction, one big step. It's a whole series of small little steps. So small little sales to get confirmation. And that's one of the things that I teach in my coaching program, right? So it's like when you start off, you want to qualify first, right? So I want to qualify to see if this is going to be worthwhile for me to develop time. So how qualified, how accredited are you? First off, are you accredited? And then second, how accredited are you? And then you'll discover that when you interact with people and when you talk with people, there's certain things that people of a certain net worth will say, right? So for an example, if they start talking about their full-time domestic help, or if they talk about their full-time domestic helpers and there's like 5 of them, is there a cook in the kitchen right now? Is there a nanny? Is there a gardener? And are they employed full-time? Like chances are that person's a higher net worth person, right? So it's just being able to, once again, pick up all those tiny little details and be able to make an assessment. Okay, is this person worth the time and effort to invest some extra time and get to know them more? But then you start off and say, hey, I'm interested in real estate, or I focus in on real estate syndications. Is that something that might be of interest for you? Right? And then see what they say. It's just to know what you're dealing with, right? So that would require some sort of buy-in, and then go in a little bit further and say, well, we invest in real estate in Texas. Would that interest you? That's another small sell, right? And they say, you know what? We only invest in real estate in New York. It's like, okay, great. Then I can go to New York. And that type of, instead of saying and wasting a whole hour talking about your real estate deal in Texas, and then for them saying, well, you lost me at Texas, the second sentence you said.
So I guess part of it is asking questions rather than just flapping your gums is the bigger part. But the one that I do, because I think I'm one of the most outrageous guys on LinkedIn as far as guarding his schedule, which is just like, hey, do you want to meet up? It's like, sure, if it's a 15-minute interview for getting your syndicator profile. And then outside of that, it's like, there has to be like intentional, starts and ends. I'm not asking much of my guests' time and they're not asking much of mine. I think that's the only other thing you can do to keep from making a meeting go over time. It's just having real clear goals and timeframes. So,
well, one of the other things that I just kind of pulled
again,
out,
I've said this before to different people, but
sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, was that it's maybe not, yes, asking questions, but also making sure I'm watching people's reactions to what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite parts of the interview. And it's usually like one of these days I'll get Zoom right where I'll know if it's going to be in gallery or in speaker mode. But you can bet while I'm all looking all busy whizzing through this stuff, I'm watching the guest to see what their reactions are at key points. And, it's a little bit of sleight of hand. But yeah, you like, yeah, the active listening, making sure that you're not wasting people's time. I think that's enormous.
Awesome.
I know it's an internal thing, but I have a real hard time valuing myself, like valuing an hour of my time. So I usually look at what somebody else is giving up in their hour, and that's how I value my hour. So if I know somebody's giving up, if they value their hour at 200 to 500, then I'm like, okay, well, my value this hour is 200 to 500. But personally, I don't think I'm doing anything special. And so I have a really hard time valuing my own hours. So for everybody out there, I know I'm not the only one. So
that's a good point then. If you think that, in what we call that is a limiting belief. And so if you're relatively new to the space, there's a delicate balance between a limiting belief and too much humility, and then just being outright narcissistic and you're just like this egomaniac. And there's a very knife edge fine line in between the two. So having that confidence. And the big way to do it is it starts pivoting when you pick up this attitude that I was explaining at the beginning, which is having an empathetic attitude, which is understanding the world from somebody else's perspective, including how they see you. And I learned this as a young advisor. So when I was more junior, I was going around, I was collecting some checks, and I couldn't really read people that well. I couldn't really read some of my clients that well. I had a client for about 5 or 6 years, and he had a heart attack and passed away. And I couldn't get a good read on this client, right? And I was pretty shocked when his wife called me and said, hey, my husband passed away.
can you come in and talk? So I came in and talked, and then she said to me, "Is like you have been the best advisor that he's ever had, and he couldn't stop talking about you for the last 5 years." I was like, I had no idea, right? I was completely shocked. It's like out of all the advisors he's had in his lifetime, he just kept raving about you. He never said it. He was the most poker faced guy. I was like, I don't think this client likes me, but he would go and rave to his wife, and I started to realize, you know what, I do have a lot of value here. And the reason why I recognize that is because I genuinely cared about people. I was empathetic. I answered my messages. I answered my messages in a timely manner. I treated people the way that I wanted to be treated. I gave them that white glove service. And when you have that attitude and an empathetic attitude, you start to increase very quickly in people's perception of who you are. So an empathetic attitude has an immense amount of value to people, especially when you get to higher net worth, because you're saving them from mental grief.
When you're like limiting belief versus humility, that's a hard one because I don't want to believe that I have limiting beliefs.
So here's how I got over it. So Angel, this is partly how I got over it. As you start to ask people when they give you a compliment, it's like, this has been one of the best deals, or this has been great. Thank you very much for signing us up. And then I would explain to people, like, what was it that you really liked about what I do? It's like, well, you did this, you answered emails. And I said, how much, the way that I act, how much is that worth to you in your life? It's like, it's priceless. Or like, say you picked up $100,000 check, right? Say, well, based on all the stuff that you did, because I had clients that said, hey, I could write this $100 check to a whole bunch of other advisors, but I picked you. I'm like, oh, thank you. I said, why did you pick me? And you start to understand. They'll say, because you did this, because you did this, because you did that. And I started to learn it's empathetic, which is empathy is not just about seeing the perspective from somebody else's eyes, but seeing yourself in the perspective of somebody else, and then getting them to tell you your value to them, and then you can start to understand there's an incredible value there. And so what I want to do is I want to make sure my ask is below the value that people perceive I have. I don't want to have, because if it's higher, if I'm asking for something that is higher than the value that somebody perceives, that's stealing in some form. But if it's lower, that's a life that's filled with gratitude in my life and somebody else's. Where they say, hey Ed, you charge us $1,000, but just knowing you, like I had clients because I was a tax specialist as well. And I charged them a fee, an annual fee. And so say there'd be an annual fee of $1,000, but I can get somebody to thank me profusely while writing $1,000 check because I saved them $40,000 in taxes. They'll write that check all day long and say thank you. And I said, well, how much is that worth to you? Well, I can tell you right now, it's worth $39,000 to us because we know you. And they'll be like, tears in their eye. Thank you so much for telling us this stuff. I can't tell you how much you've changed our life. That's huge value. But so once again, huge value, but I got a $1,000 check. That's a high cost, but it can't be looked in isolation. So as you start to grow, the way to get over your limiting beliefs is be empathetic, start to provide incredible amount of value, start to ask about what do you feel about me? And then you will start, other people, your clients will start to build it will help you get over that limiting belief.
Wow. Yeah, that's big stuff. So kind of backing up a little bit, you talk about like linear versus exponential growth. And I think about some of the people I know that
I wanted to do two things. One is I wanted to point out that anybody who's in the audience and thinking about their career, what Ed just described is fantastic advice. That's no matter what, you have to have that level of understanding about, like, what are you doing for your clients and what are you doing for your employer? And then as entrepreneurs, we all have to figure out how to do that. Now, of course, the second thing I wanted to do is I wanted to see if instead of scrambling for the mouse to pause every time, if I could just click the little thing in my ear pods, and I can, and that makes me happy.
Learning experience every time, learning experience.
Right, exactly. So let's continue.
I've literally blown up, and it might be a slow start, and then maybe 2 years later I'm talking to them and they're like, yeah, we went from 12 doors to now we have like 12,000 or something. Not really 12,000, but they might go from like 12 to 300 or 400, and it's like, holy, how'd you do that? And hearing them kind of talk about the moves and what they've done, it's more of this relationship based. But how is it that it works so exponentially versus that linear growth?
Absolutely. So getting into, and it really comes down to financial fundamentals of wealth management. And there's two different options. One of them is, and I think one of the analogies they said, what would you rather have? Would you rather have $1 million at the beginning of the month and you get to have $1 million, or a penny doubled every day for 30 days? And I think, I don't know, I can't remember the exact number it works out to, but if you double a penny, and then like a penny turns into 2 turns into 4 turns into 8, so on and so forth, right? By the end of the month, it turns into something ridiculous like 10 million, because on day 29, it goes from 5 million to 10 million. And it just totally passes by the linear growth model, right? Where if you, I think it's the actual thing is like $100,000 every week, or a penny doubled and it's just trying to compare linear growth versus exponential growth. And it's the same way that I prospect as well. So when it comes to prospecting, when you first start out, the first deal is probably very close and very similar. And what I end up doing is that for me, if I ended up getting a $50,000 or $100,000 check from a $10 million net worth client, that is a client that gets one of my best services. Because what ended up happening is that as you start to get more and more deals underneath you, your investor relations starts to become your sales, like a sales exercise. And I call it mining the diamonds in your backyard, right? So if you got a $50,000 check, my mentor said to me, like, I came back with a $50,000 check. I gave it to my boss, and my boss looked at me and he said, if it's a $50,000 check and it's a $100,000 to $10,000 client, they just gave you $50,000 to get you out of the door. That's a lead. That's not a client. And I was a little insulted, but the more I thought about it, he's absolutely right. I got to go and keep selling this or give best in class service to all my other peers. And that's how I started getting more and more of that business. That's how I ended up in family office. I had people that would pull me aside and say, hey, Ed, we got tons of other advisors that are advising me, but you're quickly getting to the top. Because when we call, you answer, or like you answer on a third ring, let alone like leaving a voicemail, right? And or if we ask for a meeting, you clear you clear your day, and you come like right away. Because we don't get that kind of service from other people, and we'd love to give you some more. So take this $50,000. Like when you spit this $50,000 out, we end up rolling it. 90% of the time when we close the deal, most of my money would roll over. Very rarely would people take the check away from me. It's because we provided.
I just want to pause right there because, like, you got this white glove service side all buttoned up. Can you comment a little bit, Ed, on when like competing on the numbers side of things? Because, like, I understand that when it comes to stocks, your hands are a little bit tied. But Angel and Jason, they really focus on their local town. And so as far as like competing strictly on price, AKA returns, there's only so much you can do. And then like, I know that the white glove service is going to more than make up for it because, it's the emotional cost of working with somebody seems to be much lower working with you or, in this hypothetical situation, because now you're more on coaching with working with accredited investors. But what comes to mind on that, Ed?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is helping a client understand that your value is not necessarily just about the investment. So what I don't like doing is I don't like to compete on price. So there's extra value that we get on that. Competing on price is basically returns in this space. So it's not just about and most of the real estate syndications are going to be very similar, right? It's 7% cash on cash, 80% IIR, a 5-year hold, right? Or something well within that range. So it's first off getting them to understand that these are the returns, and they're going to differ from stocks because stock is the way that they make returns are different. So it's not a fair comparison. It's an apples to orange comparison, and I don't think it's going to be one or the other. But when you're comparing against other apples, and you're in private equity real estate, then you can take a look at it. It's like, is somebody going to leave you for a half a point difference on cash on cash? Well, you've got to make up that in value. How much value is it for grief that if they want to sell, how quickly do you answer? If you go to a discount broker, for an example, and then people don't answer, you can't get your money out, you have no idea what's going on, that's going to cause you some grief. And some people are willing to, especially high net worth, they're willing to let go of a little bit of return or to pay a little bit more in terms of less return to get what they want, to get that service, to be in the information, all that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you got your white glove service on one side, and then the other thing that I'm obviously digging into is the underwriting is very important as a behind the scenes part of the entire service. Is just making sure it's like, how predictable is the model, and that's what Angel's hubby Jason Williams, PhD, offers. And if you scan this code, I also have the fashion featuring your underwriter in full visibility here on my screen here. Oh, this is not blown up anywhere near enough. That's much better. Is there more room in your underwriting is the question. There's the enormous screen with those funny little shirts with Jason and his bow tie. You can scan that, or you can go to theacademypresents.com to learn more about his underwriting services and all that kind of stuff. Do you want to say a few words about that, Angel?
I can also had a question for Ed too, though. But so Jason, he's a numbers guy. Numbers are his thing. And whether you want him to just check over your numbers or full on become your underwriter, he's got a sliding scale on that, and he would love to talk to you about it. It's Jason at LorrenCapital.com, LORRENCAPITAL.com, and he's super easy to get a hold of most of the time. If he doesn't reply back to you, let me know. I'll make sure he replies back to you. Not like I'm some hard-fisted kind of a jerk, but I'll just make sure he responds back. But Ed, I was thinking about something, and it was what you were just saying, and it was even what we were talking about yesterday with you saying people might, or with that idea that people might be willing to take a little bit of a less return to really support something that they want to support. And it really makes me think about like our first raise and how there were people that they didn't even ask about the deal really. They just wanted to support us. And that is just one more reason why I feel like relationship based modeling is so important, because it was a group of people that had a little bit of extra money and they wanted to see us grow. They wanted to support us and see us get further ahead. And I think that that's just one more support for why it's so important to work on your relationship building skills as opposed to your sales.
Yeah, I remember one time I was selling this was back in the life insurance world, but I was selling a policy to somebody, and he came back and he said, "Hey, Ed, I went and got some other quotes, complete the same benefit, everything, and your pricing is $2.50 more a month. What can you do?" Expecting me to discount it, right? It's like, oh, okay, because that's how they buy things, or that's how they thought the world works. And I said, I cannot. So for me, keep in mind, I'm the sales rep, right? Or I'm the client facing rep. I don't do underwriting. So when underwriting tells me, it's like, you know what, you got to offer this deal, it's going to be $2.50 a month more in premium than all the competitors. Well, I got to make up that difference. So I said flat out to my client or my prospect, I said, listen, I cannot discount. We will 100% be $2.50 more every month. So the question you got to ask yourself is, take a look at me. Am I worth $2.50 in your life? Because if you don't buy this policy, I can't advise you on other stuff. So I can't advise you on your tax plan. I can't advise you on your career. At this point, I'd been in the industry for 15 years, right? I got 15 years worth of high net worth experience. If you got a question, then I'll be able to answer it. But if you're not my client, I serve my clients first. So take a look at that. And is that worth $2.50 more every month? You end up buying the policy.
That's awesome.
Pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. And I don't know how you're doing for time, Ed. We got 9 minutes to the top of the hour. We'll blast through as much as we can. And if you need to sign off, just let me know beforehand.
It's best in class service. And I realized it's more about the investor relations. So focus more on empathetic attitude, investor relations, and it starts you'll start developing and building an exponential model. So it's not about what happens at the beginning. It happens later on when things start to double and you start becoming more referable.
Wow. So when you talk about like getting back to people, and I guess maybe like the relations part of it, the communication, do you only communicate back when they ask? Are you doing something like once a month, once a week? I mean, how much is too much?
Well, that's a really good question. And the answer is that it all depends on the specific client. So the ideal one is when you get into this incredibly high range, it goes back into developing that skill set.
That's probably an important point when you're configuring your CRM is you have to be prepared for how often do they want to be notified of things. And I think you need to systematize for that as well. But I don't know if that was part of your business much, Edmund, when you were doing that side.
Well, I think a big part of, just to elaborate a little bit more on that one subject, like the whole concept, I just started explaining using this analogy. It's just like people telling me, it's like, how do I raise capital? How do I find a high net worth client? What's the formula that I got to use? It's like, there's no formula. It's like, well, how do you do it? It's like you're asking me, how do I find a spouse? It's like, I don't know. There's no formula to it. It's like, who are you and who are you trying to talk to? It's like asking, it's like, oh, my boyfriend. How often should I interact with my boyfriend? I don't know. It depends. It'd be like some boyfriends want you to text them once a day. Some maybe 3 times a day. Some once a month. I don't know, right? It's all dependent upon the individual because it's a relationship. It's not a science.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
That of being able to read people, and like empathy turns into being able to read people. Being able to read people turns into being able to anticipate their needs and being able to provide it before they ask. Those are the skills those are the prerequisites that start to develop. But before you get there, what I end up doing is every client that I sign on, I start to ask them what kind of relationship would they like? Would they like more information or less information? How often would they like me to update them? Some of them would like, if it's a $10 million client or you have $50,000 check, let's say, you know what, just give us a call once a year. That's all. We don't really, we don't need to hear from you every week, right? Or there might be some clients that it's a $10 million or $100 million client and they gave you $10, $20 million. Like, yeah, we need a quarterly update with a full spreadsheet and full spread PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, sure, you can get that. Right? Or they might come back and say, no, just give us a 6-month update or a 1-month update, something like that. Right? It all depends on the client. So one of the best practices that licensed financial services has doing what we call KYC, know your client or know your customer. And you go through a whole bunch of different things. Is what's your investment tolerance? What's your investment knowledge? How do you want to be interacted with? where are your accounts, what's your, where do you have everything else, all those types of things. That's the best practice that I kept, not just on the financial services side or the license side, but also brought that over into the private equity side.
So if you start asking investors those questions, are they going to be used to having those questions asked?
The higher the net worth ones, absolutely. And the more that they have, like if they have a license, a proper, like even Ed Jones would do that. But if they start having like a JP Morgan Chase or some of the other bigger, like a Goldman Sachs or some of the bigger brokerage firms, 100% they'll have that. So you can just ask them and just say that, it's like, hey, thank you for your, here's your sub form. This is the PPM. How often do you want us to update you on? And just say that. You can even do it like, well, as you're closing the meeting, how often would you like me to keep you updated? And you can just be frank about it. It's like, I don't want to give you too much information to bother you, but at the same time, I want to give you as much information as you like, right? So sometimes if as I started to get better and I started to anticipate, like, is the person really busy? I could read that person, and I've interacted with those types of clients enough where I kind of already know. So usually I'll take a stab at it and I'll say, you know what, normally I update my clients on a X basis, quarterly basis, yearly basis, depending on who the individual is. Super busy and it's a $50,000 check, I'll tell them, usually I update my clients on an annual basis. However, I have an open door. Here's my number. Here's my cell phone number. Feel free to text me or call me at any time and I'll be able to answer. Other than that, you won't hear from me until another year. Right. And then if you start to interact and the person's like, whoa, wait a second, like, where's the romance? Where's the honeymoon phase? I'd like a little bit more interaction. It's like, oh, I got that wrong. But then mentally make a note of that based on this type of individual. Next time you come across another individual that seems very similar, know that year is too long. And just say, I normally update my clients on a quarterly basis. It's like, oh, excellent. I was going to ask you that. And quarterly sounds absolutely perfect. Right. So as you get to know these clients quite well, or these prospects quite well, and you've done it for about 10 years, you'll automatically know how much interaction. It becomes instinctive. And I'm usually pretty good at nailing that.
Okay.
But until you don't know, ask.
Okay. So if you're trying to like establish a good relationship with these investors, is it appropriate to send a gift? Or because I mean, they can buy whatever they want. So is a gesture like that appreciated, or is it just seen as, oh, they're trying to get me on their side now?
Right. So that's a great question. I kind of would encourage you not to send a gift because it starts to set this precedence. Because if you start and then you stop, then it all of a sudden like, what happened? Where's my birthday present this year? Right. And if you start to build a big private equity firm, and you've got 1,000 clients, you're sending out 1,000 birthday presents or 1,000. It gets too much. Right. Some people won't even do that for like some people. Like they tell advisors, be very careful about sending out birthday cards and sending out like a coffee gift card because if you start, you can't stop. And as you start to develop your book, be careful about sending thank you cards because if you start, once again, you can't stop. For me, I'm there to provide something, which is high returns. Not about this. It's how you want to provide that white glove, right? It's the value I provide is anticipating your pain points and your needs, which is you don't have much time. You're a high net worth person. Your time is worth a lot of money. So I don't beat around the bush. I'm very direct when it gives you an update and no small talk. If you start into small talk, then sure, but it has to be led by you. If not, here's the key points. And the way you pick that up, if you ever start listening to morning calls on Wall Street or shareholders updates, they don't beat around the bush. Right? Like if you go to a shareholders meeting, they won't say, hey, we're gonna have a 5 minutes for people to raise their hand and tell us about what vacation they just had. No, you have a market update. If you get into a shareholders meeting, look them straight into it. Here's our last line item. Here's our this is our profit for this year. This is where we were last quarter. It's all right down to the details right away because it's being courteous in a way that they need. Once again, it's anticipating your client's needs and understanding what's important to them, which is time. Is one of the big ones, right? And then returns, or they're pretty much hand in hand. I'll deliver very high return, and I won't waste your time. So I'm not here to send you this nice present where you have to thank me for it and it gets all awkward and back and forth. It's more about the piece that I provide in your life is deliver an excellent return, minimal supervision, and I don't mess around. And I interact with you and I give you the information in the frequency that you want. You can set me like a dial.
So I'm also like, I'm kind of hearing that technique of mirroring where basically you're copying the person across from you. Do you do that a lot, like in conversation?
Yeah, and there's many forms of mirroring, and at Sales 101, it can get a little comical, and people are like, oh, if they sit on the table, like, there's a bit of that. But once you get to the higher level of sales, there's a bit more different type of mirroring, which is psychological mirroring. So as you start to learn how to read people and anticipate people's needs, and you start to get a lot of experience in a particular avatar or market segment, you can start to mirror already what they're doing. They talk really fast, or sometimes they have an interaction with some of their staff if you're in their office, and there's, oh, hang on a second, you watch that interaction that they have, because the interaction that they have from a trained staffer that's used to working with them is the same expectation that they would hope that you update them. So if they interrupt your meeting, their executive assistant comes in and gives, and it's very bullet point to the point, no small talk, and then they're gone real fast. Then typically mirror that. That's what I would do, because he set that, or he or she has set that in their employees. But if they come in and he starts asking, oh, did you watch this movie last night? It's like, that was really great. It's like, okay, what are we up to today? Then, there's a different type of interaction. So that's what they prefer, that's what they're used to. So it's okay to maybe start to mimic that a little bit and test the waters.
Wow, so much information. I mean, you got how many decades on this?
Almost 2 decades on it, right? And that's the thing to say, that if you're a transactional based model and your idea is I want to get a $50,000 check from 100 or 1,000 people, you won't have the ability to do all that type of stuff. And for me, I just like to, I'm just a very social person. That's how I like to serve people. I like to serve, I don't want to serve or get $100,000 check in the mail from a whole bunch of people I barely know. I'd rather work with a small amount of families. And there's a best practice on Wall Street, in Canada, Bay Street. And the best practice in Wall Street, these are the numbers, which is one advisor can really only service 80 to 90 households, right? So husband and wife, max. If you go beyond 90 households, your investor relations start to suffer. And the more it starts to suffer, the more your clients are at risk of being stolen by another advisor, which is me. So if you know your limit is about 80 or 90, I ask you, are you more interested in 90, $900,000 clients or just barely accredited clients? Or are you more interested in 90, $100 million clients? What book of business is better? For me, I'd rather have 90, $100 million clients. And that's the model you got to work with. Right? So going back to that adage that I talked about, which is you can make a sale and make a commission, but as soon as you stop, everything stops. Your business stops. Or you can make a friend, a deep friend, and make a fortune. Because I still have clients that I was their friend and they're got to successive generations that still reach out to me, even though I've left my licenses, and say, hey, can you give me a recommendation who are good advisors now that we can't, now that you're not managing money anymore? I only manage our own family money, right? My family, my dad and our own direct family gets my best service now. You can't buy me anymore, right? So it's like, Ed, we're so frustrated that we can't buy you anymore. It's like, where can we find another person like you?
And of course, I've seen multiple women say, "Hey, I've got a daughter, yeah, for you, Edmund, or, if you don't want my daughter, then, maybe if you have a brother or something like that." I've heard that multiple times, and it's really hilarious to watch. Have you seen that too, Angel?
No, I was thinking something totally different. Um, so I'm going to shift here, pivot. I'm thinking about, like, so many people have funds now, and people are going with those funds, and they're going to people, and they're able to really cherry pick deals. So in those kinds of situations, how would you say that relationship based model still is going to beat them out, even though they're bringing the best of the best in a fund to help somebody get returns?
I think for me, it's a lot less about the actual product, and it's because you're looking at the underlying asset and then the structure around it. And a really good client representative, a really good capital raiser will be able to get around all those things. Because the biggest thing that people have to understand, this is what one of my mentors told. I can't remember if we got into this or not, but one of my mentors told me is like, Ed, when we're talking about real estate syndications, we're talking about private equity, you can pretty much buy the same thing for pretty much anybody across America. Once you understand that, it becomes more of a commodity, and we don't want to compete on pricing. So what do I have that nobody else has? Well, if it's not the asset, the only thing that I have that nobody else has is me. So how do I turn myself into a person of value? How do I articulate that value? And how do I sell myself? And that's exactly what I did with that insurance guy. It's like, well, you take a look at my value and ask yourself, is that value worth more than $2.50 a month?
Yeah, that's a great point. The thing that is coming out to me though is, here we are talking about 90 people being the limit of who you could serve, and a lot of people who are syndicators, they're not really doing what a stockbroker, financial advisor would be able to pull off. But the real question I've got for you there, Edmund, is, do you need to have a bigger list now than the time that you're referring to? Like are you, do you have input from like maybe your coaching students that, like previously they were okay with 200 people, but they need like 1,500 now, or like what kind of differences have you seen as far as that goes? Anything you can mention?
It's still very heavily rooted in the relational versus a transactional model. And if you start getting nervous and start thinking that I need to have more clients and more prospects and more people to talk to, you're quickly starting to head down to the transactional system. Relational system is really more about, like, if I have 80 to 90 clients, it's not to say that I don't have any further growth. It's what you should be doing is upgrading your skills and leveling up. So when I start to upgrade my skills and level up, I'll start to be able to close higher net worth people. So when I bring on that new client, then the lower end of my book, the just newly accredited, you can hire an associate and hand off the lower half of your book. And then you're always skewing your book higher and higher and higher to higher net worth, but maintaining and realizing you can really only maintain 80 household relationships. because beyond that, you're going to start forgetting people's names, all this type of stuff. And when you forget those things, you start to open up cracks where another advisor like myself can come in and steal that client from you.
Awesome.
So you just made a point that really resonated with me. And that was that, or maybe I'm extrapolating it a bit, but not every connection you have is going to be an investor. And
Absolutely.
to be able to make the distinction between the two, because I think that's always been an issue for me in deciding who's my avatar, who should I be pinpointing my efforts on. And I've never really narrowed it down, because I've always said anybody could be an investor, and they don't have a certain look, they don't have a certain body type, they don't have a certain set of clothing or cars. I've always just thought that anybody could be an investor, but I guess it's kind of like, I guess, whiskey and bourbon. All bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon.
Yeah, it's so for me, I agree with you in that in part of it. There's a really good book out there called The Millionaire Next Door, and The Millionaire Next Door talks about this multi-million-dollar person that drives like a 20-year-old car, wears just average clothes. It's not about what you would expect. For me, it's more about the attitude. One of the things that I really loved about being in a private equity firm, the reason why I started, is because I recognized that, like I had somebody tell me, I think it might have been in Rich Dad Poor Dad. And what I loved about Rich Dad Poor Dad is that Robert talks about, you get an opportunity to find a rich dad, and you get an opportunity to learn how to make $1 million, how that person made $1 million. But I thought to myself, it's like, wouldn't it be great if you could go and find a group of millionaires or a high net worth investment club and just be a fly on the wall and just sit there and listen? Well, I not only found them, but I ended up not being a fly on the wall. I ended up being in the center of everything, to the point where I was starting to educate and advise the wealthy people around me. And the benefit for that is that I tell people, if you're lucky in life, you may find a rich dad, one rich dad. But if you do, you only get one example of how that person made their fortune. Now, what I ended up doing for a decade is listening to multiple examples of millionaires. And what ended up happening is I got to see the pattern, the similarity between all of them. And I also got to see the things that weren't there from all the outliers. So by the end of 10 years, I was able to look at somebody and say, tell me your habits, tell me what you do. And I was able to figure out, what you do here is not like the other things I've seen. And then I take a look at that. 9 times out of 10, it is something that is holding you back, which is you're successful in spite of this one thing, not because of. But if you only saw that one person as the one example, you can't tell the difference. You spend 10 years watching millionaires, you can see the differences. And that's what I teach and I educate people. It's like, these are the patterns to watch for. So now I'm very selective when I prospect. I say, I look for those patterns again. You don't have to tell me how much money you have. Based on your actions, your attitudes, and the way that you work and interact with people, I can tell whether you're accredited or not, because you just look like my former clients, right? So I'll say this other thing. After 2008, I started to become incredibly selective, right? So you said, like, not everybody is a good investor. For me, after 2008, not every accredited investor was a good client for me. Because at 2008, I was like, before I got from 2001 to 2008, I was taking anybody who was accredited, because I was building a book of business, and I was just trying to hard charge as much as I could. 2008 comes around, and I had death threats. So it's like my top 2 worst clients when I updated them on the credit crisis was a death threat. And then I had you've heard this story before. I had my desk mate, she got subpoenaed, she got sued. I had another guy that like two of the other junior advisors just underneath me, they got sued, right? And I realized, like, holy crap. So after 2008. One of the questions that I ask myself while I'm doing my pitch, my presentation, is I'm watching that person carefully, asking myself, if this goes sideways, is this a particular person that's going to sue me or go to the SEC or OSC and complain against? And sometimes it's not.
Yeah, and a lot of people are coming back to this conversation like right now, saying that like this is what we're looking at, probably like springtime, something in that neck of the woods. Any remarks on that? I know, Edmund, you're always watching the Wall Street Journal, so they got to be talking in much greater depth about what to expect.
Yeah, I think a big part of this on this subject, on this point, is that if you're in a relational based model, they have a relationship with you, and if they like you, it's going to become more difficult for them to complain to the regulators. They're less likely to do that. But if you're on a transactional based model, they don't know who you are, then you're more vulnerable to having clients complain if the deal doesn't work, or if the deal goes sideways, or the deal completely collapses. Then you can be in big trouble. You have let's look into the potential of what a relational model can look like. You have 1,000 clients, you don't even know their names, they don't know who you are. The investment goes sideways. You send out a mass email and say, "Hey, sorry everybody, we have a cash call, or we're suspending distributions, or the entire investment's gone." Then you're going to get 1,000 complaints from the SEC.
Brutal. Anyway, I should mention to all of you in the audience, you are watching the REI Rocks review, where we go through the library of content from the REI Rocks summits that happen twice a year. And all of this stuff is available. We do watch it at 1.5 times speed, because that's kind of normal for us, and it's a good habit for you to start. It's a great way to consume all this information.
not worth the hassle. So, and they actually teach this in the brokerage firms. They'll teach you the red flags to junior advisors. And they'll say, one of the things to watch for is, as you're onboarding a new client, ask them, it's like, what are the brokerage firms that you've been to? It's like, I've been through 3 different firms in 2 years. That's a red flag. If you pick up a client that says, I've been with the same advisor for 10 years, and it's like, and I'm ready for a change, that's a far better quality client than somebody says, I'm incredibly frustrated with my advisor. He's a complete jerk. He's so stupid. It's like, great. It's like, when you signed up with that advisor, how long have you been with that advisor? I've been with that advisor for 9 months. Oh, okay. Bit of a red flag. How long were you with the advisor before that? 6 months. That's a red flag. I'll probably get up and walk away from a client like that. Because if that's the case, it's most likely not the advisors, it's the client. That's the problem. And you'll get nothing but heartache and headache. So this goes back into all this level of detail you won't be able to get into if you're based on a transactional model, just interested in getting a $50,000 check and moving on to the next one. You do that for a lot, you're going to be hitting some of these danger clients. And next thing you know, you're getting subpoenaed by the SEC.
So I'm thinking, like, as a syndicator or as someone that's raising capital, and you might want to ask, like, what are you looking for in an investment, or what?
That's all, yeah, absolutely. That's all part of KYC, which is, do you have a realistic expectation of what you need me to deliver, right? So I've heard of some folks out there that are syndicating right now, and they're raising capital and they're doing it online through social media, and they're having tremendous success. Well, I can tell you right now, if somebody tells me, hey, we did a $100 million raise in 1 week. I was like, that's great, congratulations. But I'll tell you what Wall Street's thinking. Wall Street's thinking is that that's great, but how many clients is that? If you raised 100 million and there's a balance between the two. If you raise 100 million in 3 clients, that's scary, right? Because those are big clients, and they're going to demand a lot from you. If it's a $100 million raise up, but you did it in 5,000 clients, that's not a book I'm interested in. My sweet spot is somewhere in between. If it's $100 million and you did it through 50 to maybe 90 clients, that's a good sweet spot.
Wow. This is just amazing stuff. I know that, like, starting out, it's not going to be easy, but I am absolutely going to focus on the people that I've been creating relationships with over the last 2 years. And the other thing that's a little bit scary is in looking at how much they, when you're asking them, how often do you need me to update you? How often would you like to see communication? When things are going not well, do you ask if something goes sideways, do you want me to increase communication? And would you ask them that, or would you just increase it?
No, you don't ask them that question, right? At the sales process, right? It's just a given that you'll do that, right? Because it's if you're about to close, it's like, oh, by the way, when the sky falls down and this investment, completely collapses, how do you want me to talk to you? It's like, no, it's obvious. You're gonna call them right away, right? It's implied. So what I would do is that, say I sense the client is like this typical client, so they only want an update once a year. So I would close off by saying, oh, by the way, let me know. Like, normally I update my clients on an annual basis on how the investments are doing. If you're okay with that, I'd be happy to do the same thing. But if you need interaction more than that, or you're like a question, feel free to reach out. Here's my cell phone number. You can call me, or you can text me whenever you want and get an update. That's fine. And it's like, and then you can, or do you want more frequency? Usually I'm pretty right, so I don't have to ask that. And it's like, yeah, well, once a year's fine. But of course, if 2008 happens, I call them right away. And then you can apologize at that time. It's like, hey, Angel, I know that we normally are supposed to call once a year, but something's really important that I think you need to see. And this is what's going on. Or in 2008, I would call them. It's like, hey, I bet you've been watching the news. And I'm like, yeah, I was meaning to call you. And they weren't too sure. It's like, because when they say I was meaning to call you, dang, that's a big check mark. I called them before they called me. That's what I call service. And my desk mate didn't do that. She just let all her voicemails pile up, and she didn't answer them. But if the crisis happens and I got a voicemail, I died a little bit inside. I was like, oh crap, I missed this client, right? I wouldn't want to get in front of it, right? It's like, I was just watching the news and I just had the thought, holy crap, how's my investment doing? And the phone rang, and I was like, hey, it's Ed. It's like, oh, thank God you called. Right? Because once again, I recognize your time is valuable. You don't want to leave a voicemail. You don't want to sit around by the phone and wait. You don't want to worry. All this type. I don't want you to worry. I want to keep you updated on what's going on.
So much.
Right? And because of that, in 2008, that's how I was able to not only keep clients but become incredibly referable. I had one of my clients. So here's how I turned around that one of my clients that gave me a death threat. After that death threat, it consistently insisted that I had to come work for him. And when I switched firms, I wanted to take a summer off, and I called him to update. Hey, I'm switching firms. I'm taking a summer off. He's like, no, you're coming to work for me. And he forced me to come work for him. And it's like, because I've never seen character like that before. During a crisis, how you're able to step in front of it and keep me updated. And even after I gave you a death threat. The second week, like he gave me a death threat when I gave him a full update. The second call I called him the next week. He said,
water under the bridge.
That was the last time I'd ever talked to you in my life. I can't believe you're calling me again after what I said to you. And I said, I work for you, and I need to keep you updated. I just kept calling him every week. Every week it just got better and better and better until the point that you have to come work for me. That's caring, empathy, kindness, caring for other people, not caring about me. When a crisis happens, it's all about other people. That's a military attitude that I picked up.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. And listening and really thinking about like military and what the military is doing, I see now why so many people with military experience are so incredibly successful in the real estate investing space.
So you've heard me say that story before. Here's an extra piece of that story that I really haven't told much people. And during that, all the time when I was updating all of my clients, most of them, and some of them started to realize this, that as they, whatever the losses were, for almost like 99% of my clients, I lost more than they did. So I was going through this because I wrote a bigger check than they did. So some of them didn't realize, and some of them says like, well, how did you do? Like I only had one client. Like I said, oh, by the way, I know that it's a rough time, but I lost almost my entire net worth at the time. So they might have lost $500,000, they might have lost 100,000. I lost everything. So I was in deeper than most of my clients, and that gave me huge credibility. I got to the point where one client asked me to verify it. One client says like, I don't believe you. Can send me a copy of your statement before this all crashed, and I did.
And that would be huge
So
too. That's wow.
And there's something noble about that. Like, imagine trying to update and service all of your clients and answering all their concerns and fears while your entire life has fallen apart at the same time.
Wow.
Right? That's a military attitude, which is forget about what's going on, look after the people that you're leading, or look after the people that you're in charge of. Right? You do that and you come through that and you build that reputation. Now raising capital after that becomes a lot easier. And that's getting into that exponential growth. Versus if you're gonna transactional, and I just grind and then chaos happens, and then it's just I'm cutting and running, and I'm just looking after my own interest. I don't answer my emails. You do that, and you start getting a lot of angry people, and your time in financial services gets cut off real short.
Wow, man, you've shared so much, so many, just jewels and knowledge bombs, and like it's wow. I've got pages of notes here. And that's one of the things that I've said in other presentations and with other speakers is, I'm here learning right alongside everybody else. And so just people really need to take it to heart that you never stop learning, because I truly believe that when you think you know it all is when you start being left behind. So you need to always be willing
absolutely.
to learn.
And I think a big part of it is going into my why. Why did I leave the industry, and why am I coaching now? And I think the big reason is that after I left the industry, a lot of people are saying, Ed, you were so rare. I can't believe, would you manage your money? Like, I can't manage money. Can you find somebody that's like you? And I started to realize that having that kind of attitude, like you alluded to at the beginning, Angel, is that a lot of people just want to get into the grind and they're more interested in themselves. And having this incredibly empathetic attitude towards other people is rare in society. So I realized that I've had a much better value educating and training other people to become that. So instead of just being one person doing it, I can try to train 20, and then 20 can maybe train 100, and so on and so forth, so that we can actually provide really great service in financial services and become a much better industry, instead of everybody just trying to make a buck off of somebody else.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for being here today and for sharing all of this, and honestly doing it without expecting anything in return. I think that a lot of people believe that there are people that only help you for something in return, and that's not the case sometimes. And I don't think that's the case here. So
I am looking for something in return. And the thing I'm looking for in return is win-win, which is I hope to make the industry a better place and make the industry, because I'm part of the industry. I have been a part of the industry. So if the industry moves in the direction that I don't like it going, which is a whole bunch of people just trying to make money off of the general public and off of accredited investors, and then I come back and I say, oh, I was a private equity real estate syndicator, and they say, oh, you're one of those slime balls, right? Then it doesn't really bode well for the 20 years of experience that I developed. But if I can help move the industry to get recognized that it's incredibly white glove, it's empathetic, it's caring, it's kindness, especially accredited in high net worth space, and I tell them, oh, I did that for 20 years. Like, oh, you're one of those you're one of those angels. It's like, that's amazing. I can't believe you did that. So there is that benefit, because that's what I really see, that if we can move it all in that direction, we start to develop a really great reputation where it inspires people. Like, as soon as I become an accredited investor, I'm going to find one of those real estate syndicators and work so much because they really care about their clients. And I can only get that I can't get that until I'm an accredited investor.
Wow. Well, I definitely one day want to be known like that, like just being somebody that cares about the people that they're involved with. And for people that are involved with me now, I really hope I've done that. Because I want people to know I care. And even when it was my students, I always wanted them to know that I cared. So that's really important to me. And I think that's when I say that my personality pushes me towards that relationship side. I think it's that piece of me that wants people to know that I care. So hopefully I will one day reach the heights of you and being able to care about, being able to show investors that I care and that I'm not just after a check, because I don't want anyone to ever feel that way.
Yeah, so I'd like to confirm for you and validate that core belief and core attitude. That for me, using that core attitude and belief is what started as the foundation of where I ended up in my career. So don't be distracted by the way that other people are doing things. And I'm sure that it's fine. It might be fine for them. It's just not the way that I did it, and it wasn't the life that I've done. Now I take a look at my 20-year career, and I'm quite happy with how I acted and how I did things.
Wow. I don't want to take up your whole day here. So just thank you so much. Thank you for being here and for sharing your experiences and the knowledge that, took you decades to amass. So thank you for sharing it with everyone here today, and everyone that's going to be able to look back on this when they're trying to go back through their notes and make sure they got everything down. Cause there's a lot here. So thank you again. Thank you for being with us, and guys, stick around because there is more to come. This is only day 2.
That's not true. There isn't any more to come. We're getting to the end right here. That was really awesome. So the doggy bag for today, I'm going to have to get some sort of fancy little graphic to pop up like the other ones where, it's reminding you about the subscription or about Marvelous Mondays or it's talking about underwriting. We need one more for the doggy bag, which is the takeaway. So what's the big takeaway from this? Like Edmund, and it still seems like, people are people and it doesn't matter how much, money they're sitting on. It's they just need to be understood and respected and all that kind of stuff. That's my takeaway. Who wants to go next?
I'll go, and I think it's just a solidification of what was said in 21, that you have to have a relationship with people. And I've been creating my own list of capital raising tips, and one of them is that just because someone's a potential investor doesn't mean you can only talk real estate around them, because many of your investors, they're born from friendships. And I don't know how that works the higher up you move in net worth, but I would love to believe that you are still basing everything in your friendships.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
Ed,
I
how
think
about you?
my takeaway for people is be empathetic. And the point about empathy, just to add a little point to that, the point about empathy, when done correctly, empathy in society is usually translated as kindness or interpreted as kindness. So when you exercise empathy and you do it right, it will be interpreted by the other person as kindness. And when it comes to capital raising, kindness is that all things being equal, the kind person or the likable person, which is kind, the likable person wins. So all things being equal, the likable person wins. All things being unequal, the likable person still wins.
I love that. I love that. And I think we occasionally run into some people who they have that nearsightedness. They think that, I work with the numbers and, I compete like this is a football match or something like that. And I can tell you, every time I run into somebody like that, the only thing that's going through my mind is how long is it going to be before they see an opportunity that they just can't resist, and then they just suspend their ethics. And you got to be somebody like, that's why I personally choose people where I can see that it's not their first rodeo. They've been through some bumps and bruises, and now it's like, okay, can we just like keep our word for once, like that sort of thing. I think that's what everybody ends up looking to once they have a few battle scars. That's some awesome stuff. So I'd really like to thank you for joining today, Edmund. Every time you come along, I think it really changes how people are approaching this entire industry. Me coming from the tech side, I saw what all the spammers are doing. And it was amazing because even we were sending out 5 million emails a month, literally, and it was before I started there. So that was like 6 years at least of 5 million emails a month. And that's not even doing any of the stuff that a lot of these guys are doing. So I like the integrity that you convey. And I think it really helps everybody who's in our network. So thanks for that. And thanks for joining us, Edmund.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I just hope that I can help people build a better career or build a better future.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Angel, you want to sign us off?
I just want to say thank y'all for being here. Thank you for taking a look at this, and it's recorded, even though it's live right now. It is recorded. You can go back and look at stuff, and I would even say take notes from the notes. These are just really awesome, and I love looking back on them and learning even more every single time we do. We do this every Friday. We'd love to see you next Friday. We'll be here at 11 Eastern, and hopefully you will be too.
Sweet. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe or follow or do whatever things you do on this platform. We're like all over the internet and stuff. So thanks. See you guys.
Take care. Bye.